Thank you, Howard. I'll ask the panelists to come on up and take your seat. While I explain this concept that we started about a dozen years ago, this our summer series, we wanted an opportunity during the summer that some of our groups could take a break and from meeting and provide a venue that you could come and get some good input. But we also just wanted a chance for us to get together. Normally, we only get together at banquets or special occasions. In this case, it gives us 3 times during the summer to hear some great teaching, some practical Christianity that you're going to hear today about how to share the truth in love. If you think about that topic, as Rob and I came to the conclusion that we wanted to base it out of Ephesians 4:15, hardly a conversation goes by that I haven't had with somebody, a difficult conversation or one that I wasn't really looking forward to, that I don't leave that conversation thinking, was I too strong in what I communicated? Or did I really give the gravity of the situation to that person? Did I just kind of weasel out at the end? Was I too gracious or was I too forceful in the truth? I think that's something we all communicate, all deal with in terms of communication. And obviously there are so many other forms of communication that people use today, email, text. How many times you've hit the send button and think, oh, I wish I hadn't sent that. So we think it's a very applicable topic. We have 3 distinguished men that are going to give just great answers, things that they have learned, that they've done right, things that they have done wrong. And so we have Jay Dixon from Northwest Mutual. We have Leroy Abrahams from Regions Bank, and then we have Blake Stevens from the Omen Group. So guys, first question is, tell us a little bit about yourselves, and so we can get to know you and your career.
Ready to go ahead. Okay, Jay Dixon, been with in the insurance and financial services business for 28 years. Started my career in Montgomery, Alabama a long time ago, and moved up here to Hoover 18 years ago. And so we're currently over on Data Drive, me and a few of the guys out here in the audience. So married, have 2 grown children, 26-year-old daughter, 22-year-old son, and I'm a proud new granddad for 9 weeks now.
Congratulations.
9 weeks, that's right. If you need some pictures, I have 373 and 17 videos, just in case anybody needs to see them before I leave.
I'm Leroy Abrahams with Regions Bank. I've been in banking now. It's almost embarrassing to say. It's coming up on 32 years. Started my career in Texas, went to TCU, and since then have lived and worked in about 6 different states, and I finally got it right, so we're done. Some of us, it takes a little bit longer to get there. Married with 3 kids, 2 boys, one 27, another one 26, and a daughter that's 19. She started college in the U.S. That's a long story that I won't tell, but her first college experience in the U.S. began a couple of weeks ago. And I knew I was in trouble when she heard from her roommate and they wanted to coordinate bed sheets. And I thought, this is not something that I'm familiar with. Completely foreign to me, but getting a girl in school is very different than getting boys in school. So,
my name is Blake Stevens. I grew up in the area in Hoover, Sanford alum, around the 2000 mark. And during that time, I started working at O. Henry's Coffee. Stayed there for about 5 years, and then went on with Starbucks. A career there for 14 years that led me to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and came back about 2 years ago working for the Onan Group as this crazy title of Director of People and Culture, and so we're a growing company and putting a framework together kind of as we grow, and so that's my charge. And so the customer service industry for quite some time now, dealing with people, and so I guess that gives me some sort of conversation piece today. 2 kids, 8. My son Benjamin turns 8 next week, and Sarah is 3, and wonderful wife of 10 years. So.
I'm going to stand behind so that can everybody hear? Okay, good. We're taping this and we're trying to get clarity for those that didn't make it this morning. So I mentioned before that we tend to go one way or the other on the spectrum. Maybe we feel like we're a little too gracious. Maybe we think we're a little too forceful with the truth. How about giving us kind of your bent and how you kind of deal with knowing yourself well?
Okay. Well, I lean towards grace only because I'm growing in understanding the grace God's given me with the Son. And, the first time I read through the Old Testament, I looked at the people of Israel and I thought, these guys are boneheads. They don't get it, And the second time I read through it, I kind of said, well, I guess I can kind of relate. And then the third time I read through it, I thought, oh, I am the children of Israel. I am them. And I can't stop doing all the dumb things. And so it's very difficult for me, and I have to have people around me to be the tough guys because I lean more towards the grace part. Just because I just am growing in my knowledge of that. So
I would say I lean more towards grace. Maybe it's because I realize I need it more.
Yeah.
But over the years, as I've had the opportunity to lead people, the thing that has helped me maybe moderate is recognizing that sometimes, being gracious to the point of not being clear with truth is a problem. And if I am being overly gracious to one individual who then is becoming a negative impact on the broader group, then I've done the organization a disservice, and I've done others a disservice. As a matter of fact, I've probably done that individual himself a disservice. So trying to balance that, but recognizing that, left to my own devices, I would opt for harmony as opposed to confrontation. But, when you're in a leadership role, you don't have that choice. Sometimes you have to confront an issue.
So I guess in my HR role, I try to, I get the Switzerland approach from neutral. It's either, and earlier in my career, I was much more gracious. I wanted everyone to like me. I wanted everyone to think that, as a manager, the harmony and I leaned so much towards grace that some of those relationships began to not pan out like I wanted them to, and it ended up in having to overly say truth, and it wasn't healthy. Susan Scott wrote a book called Fierce Conversations, and in that she talks about interrogating reality, and talks a lot about how to be present in conversations and really listen. And so I think, I say neutral, but I think that the truth is grace. Mm-hmm. And if you say it in the right way, and if you understand the individual that you're talking to, and which we should, right, that's where that comes. We talk a lot about trust and earning the right to be heard. And so I feel that if you have earned the right to be heard, you have earned a sense of being able to say the truth, and that being able to not leave this big emotional weight with that individual that is, that you've left this pain. And so I tend to, it's situational, but I would say the truth, but through grace and love.
That is an excellent book, Blake. I've read that book as well. Well, let's put it on a more even practical level. Employee evaluations that you have to deal with. You have to give truth, obviously, and salaries and benefits and different things are based on that. How do you have any tips on how you make that go well and yet still share what needs to be shared in employee evaluations?
Yeah, for me, before I go into any difficult conversation, because I'm a real emotional person, and I go in to fire somebody and I cry and they're giving me tissue as I'm walking out the door. That's really true. Y'all wouldn't believe that, but it's really true. So it's difficult. So I have to write down my thoughts so that I can make sure that I'm covering the bullet points that I want, because my emotion runs hard and I can't think clearly. So I need to think through what I want to say and what I want to communicate before I meet with somebody, and I just write down my notes. So I have bullet points to any conversation, and if I have my little book here, I'll pull it out. And if I'm I know I'm going to have a difficult conversation with somebody, I'll put their name on one of the pages, and as I think through over the few days before the meeting what I want to say, I'm just jotting notes down. And then I get a final draft, and then I'm as prepared as I can be to not let my emotions get the best of me. But when I walk into the meeting, I'm always asking myself things like this: how well do I really know that person? I go back and look at their file. I look at the notes that I've had from other conversations. I look at their psych profile. We do psych profiles, and the way that they best receive information. Because a lot of times we tend to want to communicate in the way we like to be communicated to. And I think that we have to be careful about that. So I really try real hard to start with, how does this person tick? Who is this person? How well do I know this person? And then I'm always asking myself the question right before I walk in the door to have the conversation that's difficult. Does this person really know that I love them and that I want the best for them? And if I can get that conveyed across to them, then it seems like the rest of the stuff goes a little bit better. So that's kind of how I try to handle it. And again, I also bring a lot of tissue. So.
Wow. That's pretty good.
Well,
I ran out of tissue in my office, so I got to replace that. When I think about the evaluations, that is probably one of the most challenging spaces in terms of communication. When it works well for me is if there's been clear expectations up front. So everybody understands, we've got agreement on this is what good is going to look like. These are the expectations, and then there's follow-up throughout, so that it's not, an annual event that 365 days after the first conversation, now we're going to go back and see was it done or wasn't it done, as opposed to hopefully some ongoing conversations, some check-ins, some coaching along the way. So there's agreement all the way through, and so hopefully the evaluation then is not a surprise. It's just kind of, it's a continuation of the conversation that's been taking place. It doesn't always go that smoothly. I mean, sometimes, all of you know this, one of the things that I continue to learn as a manager is the differences in terms of how the same event can be interpreted very differently by different people. And we have a process where people will go through and do a self-evaluation. And it's amazing how many people are like all role model expectation. They have performed at a role model level, and I'm thinking, wow, in my mind, role model means you're kind of walking on water, and you haven't walked on water this year. So it's just, and then you have to figure out, how am I going to have this conversation with this person that communicates I care about them and I want what's best for them, but I really don't agree with where they've evaluated themselves, and that's a challenge. And I think that any conversation like that, the more groundwork you can lay, to the point that Blake was making, Jay made, about communicating with somebody that you actually care about them and having invested in them prior to the conversation, really helps that go a little bit better. The only other thing I'll say, and then I'll be quiet, is you can't expect every conversation to go as well as you'd like for it to go. Sometimes there are going to be some uncomfortable conversations, and I've learned that I've got to do a better job of being comfortable with discomfort, because we grow in uncomfortable situations. We don't grow in a comfort zone.
As I think through this, there's one elephant in the room at every performance formal evaluation. That's a merit increase. And as I think about that over the time, it's become, as many of you guys that look around, the evaluation in the last, few years has changed in the HR world of, what it becomes much more a legal document of this person said this about. Can I get a copy of my evaluation so I can read over it and see what negative things you said so that I can all of that being said, the first thing is I really have tried to do is separate the merit increase from the review process and from those conversations. And yes, there is formality to that, but so that's one thing. The second thing is we've said, is taking the emotion out of the conversation. It's not about me. It's about the organization. And so if the expectations of their success and what success looks like are built on the organization's success, then that's where the true observed behaviors can come through, because you say, hey, when you did this, it led to this. Not when you did this, this is how I felt about you. Or this is how you made me feel. It's when you did this, it impacted the organization. So that's that. But all of that being said, and we all alluded to it, is the performance evaluation starts in the interview process. You're telling them what you expect of them, and you're asking. And then you're explaining what they should expect from you. And so, if that all coordinates properly through that process and that relationship's built, that first 90 days is so crucial to the teaching process and understanding that role. But when the coaching comes into play, it's not going to be a surprise, right? It's not going to be, oh my God, I didn't realize that. No, it's going to be like, hey, we talk about what I try to do in the interview process is understand a little bit more about the individual. So if it's football that they like, or if it's hanging out with their kids, I'm not going to take family and hold it over their head, but I'm like, hey, we both have sons. Like, let's talk about, how, you're being a little bit, a parent-like as a parent in this situation, and we might need to back up a little bit and be, let's have some empathy and coach and stuff like that. And so that's kind of how I have handled that over the years. And believe me, it wasn't like that, when I started. So there's been a lot of horrible things that I've said in an interview. I'm like, man, that was just boneheaded. But those are things I've learned.
Yeah, that's good.
Man, I was just listening to some of the things you said, and you alluded to it, Blake, is this parenting, how much we can learn from parenting by having clear expectations and setting out, this is what we expect, this is, there's going to be consequences if you're not, and kind of like an employee evaluation, to be a parent sometimes you got to have the hard conversations. You can't be just a friend to your kids. So, Leroy, you're in a tough business. Regions is a pretty big organization. And so just the fact that you're in a large corporation, people can feel like nobody knows me, I'm unappreciated, nobody cares. How do you deal with just some of the issues in terms of people in such a big organization? How do you communicate value and just help people along the way?
It's a great question. It's and I know regardless of the size of the organization you're a part of, or even if it's just your family, communication is a real challenge. And I think about, and especially in the age that we're in, there's so many different ways to communicate with the digital channels and everything else. And there's a lot of things that can get lost in translation in some of the ways we communicate. As I thought about this, I try to come up with some way to summarize my thoughts in like an ABC format. So the A and B work pretty well. The C is a little sketchy. So if you guys could think of another C to help me out, I'm open to suggestions. So it's audience, brevity, and compassion. That's my ABC. So when I think about that, I think, so who am I communicating to? What's the audience, or who's the audience? And more, I think we're all aware of the fact that if you put something in email, the audience could be whoever. And so trying to think through, can somebody read this absent the context and be okay with what was said? Or can somebody look back at this in 3 months, 5 months, or whatever, and not feel that whatever was said here was inappropriate? Or am I forwarding a chain of emails to my boss that he has to scroll, 6 emails in to find it? Or should I, summarize and bullet point? Should I go back through and delete some things that don't really need to be further communicated because they may actually make other people look bad? And so all of that stuff is kind of factored in, because it's amazing sometimes you could forward something and not really appreciate that, 4 emails deep is something that's probably really not meant for further distribution, So there's all of that. I bucket that in the audience. What's appropriate for the audience to hear? The second thing I think of is brevity. So how can I, in an age where we're all way too busy, I can't physically read all the emails I get. I've got to sort through and decide which ones I'm going to read, which ones I'm just going to delete, which ones I'm going to forward, which ones I actually have to pay attention to. If somebody's going to hear the message, how can I be brief enough to where they'll look at it, yet complete enough so they understand what's going on? So I think that's important. And then this whole compassion thing, and this is the one, you guys help me out if you think that there's a better word here. But in an organization our size, I try to think through who's going to be impacted by this and who needs to know what first. So before I send something to one individual, do I need to make sure that there's a couple of other people that will be impacted that are in the loop on this? Or should I get some feedback from a few others before I do this? So there's this whole trying to put myself in somebody else's shoes and understand how are they going to be impacted and what's the right sequence of who needs to know what first or who needs to know what concurrently and all of that. And it's just a lot to think about. And I don't always quite get it right, but I think having an awareness or trying to go through a discipline of going through a process around that is important. And, maybe we'll never always get it right, but I think you have to be thinking about it. Otherwise, I end up sending things that probably shouldn't be sent.
That's good.
Wonderful thoughts. Well, Jay, you're in a business a tough business where I've heard that the attrition rate in 6 months can be as high as 80 to 90%. So how do you, communicate to new people what it takes to succeed?
Yes, great. I guess that I would say that there's a direct correlation with the difficulty and the payoff. And what I found, and I'll say it something like this, what does LeBron James, Jordan Spieth, and a surgeon have in common? And they all do things that most other people can't do, and they're handsomely rewarded for it. So we don't apologize for the difficulty of the business that we're in. We're in the business of serving other people, and we're also in the business of trying to get other people to delay gratification and to think of others and not themselves. And that's a hard sell. It's very difficult to find enough people out there that feel that way. And so one of the things they did when I started a long time ago in Montgomery, I got told something that really changed everything for me, and they said this. They said, Jay, we have a system. And the system isn't on trial. The system works. If you do this, we can quantify your results within 3 to 5%. So the system isn't on trial. That's off the table. You're on trial. Can you do the work? And I thought, wow. Then I kept thinking, well, I'm not the smartest guy here. Let's see. But if thousands of other people have come before me and figured it out, surely to goodness, maybe I can too. So I think that whenever you're talking to somebody about a difficult opportunity maybe that you're trying to present to them, I don't try to sugarcoat how difficult it's going to be, because I'm actually looking for the person that enjoys the difficulty because they want the payoff. They want to be able to pour into other people and at such a high level that in return they get the things that they want for their hopes and their dreams and their family. And so I really don't shy away from the difficulty of it. I actually say, if you're afraid of getting your feelings hurt, don't come here. If you're afraid of accountability, don't come here. If you think that this is going to be easy, it won't be. Because my favorite thing about my business is people. And my most frustrating thing in the world about my business, you see where I'm going?
Yeah.
Is people. And do you know why people do stupid stuff? Because they're just like me. And they're just like you. We all do stupid stuff. And I think that we can, one of the things that Lex Williamson, one of my heroes and mentors, said, that we want to judge other people by their actions, but we want to be judged by our intention.
Mm-hmm.
I've had some arguments in my kitchen with my wife with that same situation. I intended on taking that trash out. I didn't intend to open my big mouth. But sometimes I do. So I think it's what we've said before is expectation. And to do something great, you're going to have to push through some difficulty. Yeah. And that's the people that we're looking for. Everybody loves to be a veteran in my business. Everybody loves the upside of my business after they've been around 10 years. It's fantastic business. Just hard the first few years. And most people just don't have the capacity to delay the gratification in most things. And I think that's a battle that we're struggling with everywhere today in our country. So
that's great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, Blake, you're helping people find jobs. And a job for us as men, and I think even for ladies, it's a very strong part of our self-concept and how we get our self-worth. How do you help assess and communicate people's strengths and weaknesses to find the right fit?
You know, it's interesting is when people come to you, or we even not come to you, but you have conversations. It depends on where they are in the process. You know, I was with Starbucks looking for something for about 2 years, but it wasn't formally out there. You know, I had a job, and I was like, hey, I need to get back home, and that was the reason why. But some folks don't have that. They don't have a job, or in their horrible, situation at work, and so the emotion wrapped around that is so much different because there's, the home and everything around that they support is in jeopardy. And so the emotion around that. So first I've got to identify, okay, where are we in this? And so that's the one thing. But throughout, and we go back to performance evaluations because that is something we're talking about. I've always worked and tried to make sure that when I'm talking about someone's strengths, I don't say weaknesses, technical is opportunities or things that they're not as strong with. So with that being said, I really focus on those strengths, and there are so many books out there, Strength Finders and all of that stuff that helps us relate, but a book's not going to help you with that. It's really experience and what they're doing. So strengths, but then couple that with, hey, if you have a difficult time speaking in front of people, and you want to have a sales career, well, that's a weakness. Mm-hmm. But if you really like talking about one-on-one conversation, what you love and what you're about, well, let's start with 2 people. Now let's start with 3 people. And you work that up, and there's not like overcoming a weakness tomorrow. Like it's overcoming a weakness and that just that delayed gratification. It's 90 days, a year, and it's with that truth and communication of saying, hey, you're not going to get over this in a week, in 30 days. But there's a step process that we can support you with and help you with and give. But it's going to be your decision if you want to do that or not. And it's what Jay was talking is putting it back on the individual and saying, hey, here's what I see, and here's the observed behavior that I've seen, and here's what I hear you saying. If it's someone I haven't worked with, now what? Here's some things I see in you work on. I see you really good at this, but it's coupling that strength and helping them with that and finding things that they're really good at, and bringing some of those weaknesses alongside. I will say that, and Jay, you couldn't have said it, that delayed gratification is some folks see success of people. We've got a lot of successful people in here. And a lot of folks are going to look at you and say, man, I want that. But it took you a long time to get there. And some of that, you've learned so much. Over the person I was 20 years ago, I'm not today. But people see what how I communicate with folks and how I do things. Like, man, there's a long road ahead. And so they want that tomorrow. And so really being truthful in the time it took, but with humility, not saying, hey, man, I walked through the snow. You know, not giving them all the things you did, but saying, hey, here are the things I learned along the way and the mistakes I made, and working through that. And that's the one thing I really try to do. Saying it's, the job you take tomorrow might not be the job you end up with, but it's a stepping stone to get you where you want to be. And so that's how I approach that.
All right, gentlemen, when we're communicating truth, obviously all of you have a strong faith in Jesus Christ. How do you, in the marketplace and in your company, communicate that truth that's so much a part of you without coercing employees or not getting yourself in a legitimate legal mess?
Where's Boog? Boog, can I talk about you for just a second? Good. No pressure. So in business, you have to be concerned on the legal side. And I get that. And again, y'all have to understand that I'm a little on the emotional side, not on the logical side when I'd make some decisions. And the answer is always to love more. The answer is not to love less. It's never to love less. It's always to love more. And I think that we get so concerned about covering our back ends on these business things that we're in that it paralyzes us. And I just keep thinking through when I'm meeting the Lord that what did I do? And was I afraid of some man or some man law that prevented me from reaching out and loving people? So Bob works with us, and he's been with us how long now, Bob? 8 years, doing a phenomenal job. Bob's family came from more of a scientific background. He comes to work for us, wasn't a believer. So he says, after he'd been here about 6 months, he said, hey, Jay, I just don't believe all those same things that you do. And I said, I know. And he said, I'm just concerned that it's going to prevent me from growing because I don't have the same thought process and faith. And I said, Bob, you don't have to worry about that. We're going to love you. And I think that Bob, on the outside looking in before he came to Christ, he saw that we loved him. Even if he didn't understand it, even if he didn't agree with it, he saw that we loved him. And I was going to profess my faith to him on a consistent basis and told him, look, when the Holy Spirit convicts you, you can like it, you can not like it. That's how this thing works, brother. I'm just going to tell you. All I know is I was standing in front of the preacher, and he says, what you doing down here? I said, I don't know. Here I am. And that's what's going to happen to you. And that's what happened. And the point being is this, you got to be bold in your faith. And if we get so locked in and worried about what other people think, man, I think we're missing the mark. So I just think that, at some point you just realize that there could be something legal, there could be some issue, but you know what? So what? And I really don't have anything that I mind giving up too much except my family. And so that's okay. And when you can get to that stage, but you can communicate it in a way where you're just really trying to love people, it just doesn't come off as offensive. And we've had a lot of grace in our office because we profess the Word and we claim Christ, and we're very politically incorrect, like you wouldn't believe. But somehow or another, God has had His protection on us, and we've just not had an issue. I can't explain it except that it's a God thing. That we've just been blessed to be able to communicate our faith to people. But I think the way that you do it, and when people know that you love them, like Bob didn't understand, or maybe Bob didn't even agree, but he understood the intent behind the message. And I think that opened a dialogue for him to be curious, and then the Holy Spirit convicted him. And we got to go to that Presbyterian church, and we got to liven the thing up a little bit when he got saved, and when he got baptized. We were pretty fired up about that. So anyway, that's what I'd say.
Oh, I appreciate that. Now, I would say when you're working for a Fortune 500 company,
It's harder, yeah.
yeah, you don't have maybe quite as much of the flexibility because there's a lot of different pieces of work. With that said, I consider myself extremely fortunate to work for an organization where the individuals have Christian values, and it may not be that that Grayson Hall gets up in front of a group of people and talks openly about his faith, but the way he carries himself, what he chooses to say, how he says it, what he does, it's pretty evident to folks where he's coming from. And so when you're fortunate to work at an organization like that, it's a little bit more liberating. It's also more liberating, frankly, and a lot of you guys may not appreciate this because you may have grown up in Birmingham, Alabama. But for a guy that's, lived in New York, Houston, Denver, and Cincinnati and several other places, you realize that when you're in Birmingham, Alabama, and you're a believer, you have conversations here that you just really can't have in a lot of other places in this country. And so that in itself has been liberating. And I mean, there are times that now, I'll pray with people in my office. They've got concerns or issues. I will tell you all that, before I go into any meeting, before I get up in front of a group of people and before I present anything, that I'll have prayer. I'm fortunate to have an assistant that I know she prays for me. We've prayed together before I've gone into things, and so there's ways to express faith, and people watch even the way you make decisions and the conversations that you have with them around the decisions and what you prioritize. And then when I'm more open is when I'm asked a question, and then nobody can get in trouble for just responding honestly. So in our company, when you move into a leadership role at certain levels, you do what's called a jump start. I don't know if you HR guys, which is where people get around when you're not in the room, and they put everything on the board that they want to know about you, and then you have to come in and answer all their questions, and they get to know you better. So when there's opportunities like that and people ask me, well, what are your priorities or what makes you tick or whatever, then I feel very free to talk about my faith because you've asked me. And then a lot of times that results in follow-up one-on-one conversations later on. So that's how I try to approach it in the organization I'm in.
Man, I love that jump start. I'm going to do that.
It is a powerful tool. It really is neat.
Do that.
I'm very fortunate now that I'm with an organization that is led by believers. And that's a constant conversation that we have. And even this morning, the person I report to is not able to be here, and he sent me, hey, praying for you this morning. And that's kind of what we do. And he's going through some situations. I'm doing the same thing with him. But I did tell you who I worked for before I came to Birmingham, and that's a totally different environment. And there were things that were that I was having to lead and answer for and really promote that didn't line up with who I was and my values. And I was one person at work and another person at home, and the beauty was I had, my wife knew that, and I had the support of her and understanding, okay, this is who I am, and she was, very supportive. So that's where I am. But you have to understand what my mindset is going into the situation. In Deuteronomy, we hear that love, teach, and live, right? And then we hear about putting something on the frontlets of your eyes and the doorpost of remembering that, hey, you're supposed to do this, right? Like, of remembrance. When times are getting tough, remember that, hey, we're committed to this. Jesus hits it again with what's the greatest commandment. But then Paul talks about, hey, if whatever you're called to do it in love, with patience, humility, and gentleness. And so all of that is, there are things that you can do, and the person who you can be, knowing who you are, that's just a way of life. Mm-hmm. It's not, hey, Jesus told me to tell you that this, or God is leading me in this direction. People see that. And I can walk through my career and know that there were times when I was closer to God, and there were times when I was not. And those times that I was, He was showing me, and there were good things happening around me. But when my worst year of my life was in Montgomery, Alabama. I had no connections, nothing. I spent a year there opening up that market, but I was so distant from that connection, just with reading and connecting, and I felt that. But when I started reconnecting back in the church, and I did a lot of stuff with Young Life and connected with that, things started to change. And an opportunity happened that I was able to move into another Opelika, and I met my wife, and so things just happen. And so I say all that, how do you do that? It's the mindset going into it of humility, patience, gentleness, and love that really drives what I do. And a couple folks that in our Bible study today, I'll say, hey, I'll send them, where are you? So I can pressure them into coming, so that's good. But if I was at my previous employer, I probably wouldn't go over well. So I just, there are differences now, but that's how I approach.
That's good.
Be thinking, I'm going to ask one more question, then I'm going to open it up for you also be thinking of questions. What role does silence play in gracious communication? Maybe you have an instance where you weren't silent, or maybe where you were and it turned out better.
This is probably one of my 400 greatest weaknesses. This is at the top. Yeah.
That sounds like a book.
Well, my wife has said to me before, I read in a book, and the question was, if you really want to improve, go ask somebody and ask this question. Hey, baby, what is it about me that other people would change if they could? Okay, not what is it about me that you would change. That's too personal. What is it about me that other people would change if they could? So I said, that's a great question. I'm going to go and ask Camille. That's kind of safe. She can't pick on me. It's other people. So I said, hey, honey, what is it about me that other people would change if they could? She goes, oh, that's easy. I got that. So hold up. You want to give it some thought? No, I got it. I said, you sure? Oh, yeah, this one's an easy one. Oh, okay. Okay, give it to me. She said, the problem that you have, Jay, no, let me start over. The problems that you have, but we'll talk about this one, is that you think that you already know the question and you think you already know the answer because you're doing what you're doing and you think you're pretty good at it. And sometimes people just need to be heard. Maybe sometimes people don't even need a solution. I just need to be heard. Other people just need to be heard. So if you'll just practice the 5-second rule. Just wait. Somebody gets through talking. Wait 5 seconds. So at least you're giving the impression that you're thinking about what they said. So you don't look like such a know-it-all. And I went, thanks, honey. I think. So that's what I'd say. I'm working on it. I really struggle because I want to fix. I want to solve. I want to love. I want to encourage. And what I realize sometimes is when people can come to their own conclusions by us asking great questions or just listening to them, then that sometimes is a whole lot better. And so I struggle with that. I'd love to say I have that figured out, but I really struggle with that. So
I'm not sure I could add a whole lot to what Jay just said, other than, I'd have the courage to ask my wife what he asked.
I said other people. Did you hear that part? I said other people.
I don't think that'll help me. I'm still working on this one too. when people call me or they come to see me, it's generally because they're expecting an answer. And you kind of get in that mode of problem solving, fixing stuff, being kind of this dispenser of whatever, decisions or something. And I try to listen. You'd have to ask people that work with me to evaluate how well I'm doing on that front. But I try to listen, but I'm not sure I'm being as successful as I need to be in terms of incorporating as much silence into conversations and just being comfortable that every moment doesn't have to be filled with a voice. If not somebody else's, then I have to jump in and do it and just kind of let whatever's been said settle for a while and let somebody else maybe break that silence. So I'm working on it.
Yeah, it is very difficult, but the Susan Scott book, Fierce Conversations, I read it a while back. And in that she talks about let the silence do the heavy lifting. And when you think about that, when you think about the truth and the grace and what we have to present to people, what we have to tell people in this setting, and I'll get to another in a second. Like, I often say, hey, you present it, you tell them how that made you feel when they did a certain, and just let that sink in. And as you do that, that starts to resonate with them that you really don't want to go any further. This is what it's about. We talk a lot about listening to understand and not listening to defend. That is not easy because we all had a way that we did it. We all had a way that we messed up, and we don't want that of other people. I mean, if you only knew, but some people in this world today, of constant change, people are influenced by different things than we were. Their experience is different than ours was. Their education is different than ours was. Their family life is different than ours was. Different things are going to hit them in a different way. They have to experience it in themselves so that now, the next time that happens and you're not there, they're not going to come back to you to ask you how to do it. They're going to understand it and be able to make decisions on their own. And so I found that by listening to understand their position instead of defending mine, that changes the way and the relationship. In a coaching conversation and a conversation in general, I talked a lot about earning the right to be heard. We only have a couple chances on that. If someone comes to you and you respond in a different way or tell them what to do, that's what your relationship's going to be. If you answer your phone every single time someone calls, they know that they can call you every time they have a problem. But if we allow that silence, that not answering the phone, not responding to a text message immediately, I find that that they come up with the right answer. And then the follow-up is like, hey, man, you made a great decision. Or, hey, you made a decision. It got a result. Might not have been the result we're looking for, but you made a decision. And Starwick's taught me a lot about there's not a problem or a situation you do that we can't fix. Right? There's not a problem that this person or decision they make that we can't fix it. And if we understand that, and that in this fast-paced world where we have to make decisions right there, being quiet, it changes the conversation. It changes the relationship because now they know they have. And so that's kind of what I've adopted. I mean, that's not easy. Man, you just know. And with your kids, there's so many fun things you can talk about. But yeah. So that's kind of how I approach it.
Almost out of time. Anybody has a quick burning question? And y'all cover.
There's pretty good diversity, I think, in the room. And technically, I'm a millennial, but I like to hear the perspective of the millennial push in the workforce and how maybe each one of you real briefly might try to take advantage of that surge, or how you cope with
Go ahead, fellas.
Me?
Yeah.
Want to go? Yeah, sure.
Why you ask that question? I'm just kidding.
Oh,
No.
okay.
Yeah, so...
Full disclosure now.
All right, here we go. We're going to have a fierce conversation after. But no. So, there, man, if you guys go back and look up Simon Sinek's thing about millennials, it is beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And it's beautiful not because he's saying this is who they... It's not complaining. It's like, it's how they got, how this generation, forgive me for saying they, how this generation, how we got here. And man, I'm telling you, I will argue this point. People just want to be heard in their own way. Millennials just have a special way they want to be heard. Every generation in here wants to make an impact. This generation wants differently. It doesn't matter. I really truly believe everyone wants to be important, significant in their own way. And so by understanding what that person is looking for and diving into that individual, I really feel that, millennial, baby boomer, whomever you're speaking with, it's going to make a difference in that. And I really do believe that. I know that there's and I've done a lot of study, and I speak a lot about generational, nuances and what they want in the workforce. But as in where I sit and what I'm charged with, I have to make sure each person hears and understands what we're trying to do, whether it's generation or not. Ronnie brings up a great point. That there are people label millennials that don't act like millennials. I mean, so I don't try to put people in place, and maybe that's just my weird take on it. I never, pledged to fraternity, and then I was labeled an independent, and I just don't want labels. Don't put and so so it's just that kind of freaks me out that you're putting me in this box, and so that's my. I can speak all day about that, but. So I don't want to put somebody in a box. I don't want to put somebody in. I want to know them as an individual. And that's how I approach it.
We're going to have to cut it off, so I want to get you. Let's give a round of applause. I'm going to ask a favor of you, if you'll get a picture of the panel as soon as I pray for us. Thank you for coming. Again, thank you, Dean Finch, for letting us be here. Love being with you guys. I sit here amazed at the answers. It's just thank you for your humility and your honesty. And we're very grateful for you being a part of this opportunity for these men here and lady. So let me pray.